Good day, everyone. Welcome to our DevOps.com Media Ops live roundtable. We've got a great live roundtable for you today, and we're really looking forward to sharing with you. However, doing these roundtables, I've done a number of them now. No matter how good our panel is, the roundtables are as good as our audience is. It's really up to our audience that makes or breaks these live roundtables. We've set these roundtables up to be light on prepared content in terms of slides. This isn't a slideware show, and more on interactive interaction with our audience. So before we introduce our panel and get started, I wanted to take a moment and introduce the platform that we're using, which is called Big Marker. By the way, I'm Alan Schimmel, CEO, Media Ops, Editor-in-Chief at DevOps.com, and I'll be your moderator host today. So as I was saying about Big Marker, if you don't mind, I'd like to draw your attention to the communications module, which for most of you is in your browser window. On your right-hand side, you'll see it says in sort of bigger font, chat, Q&A, polls, handouts. And that's how you'll interact with us here today on this roundtable. Chat is just that. It is chat. There are 4 different kinds of chats listed there, or 3 different for most of you: public, private, and Twitter. We don't use Twitter. Private is if you want to do one-to-one chat with someone, which, you know, this is not a Tinder or something like that. So, but if you wanted to talk with someone, you can. Public chat, you can interact. Anything you put in public chat is public for everyone, and it's not our recommended way of interacting with the panel. If you want to ask the panel a question, I want to refer you over to where next to chat is Q&A. If you go into Q&A, you can actually put your questions there, and they are queued, and we do have a moderator off camera who will be able to go through those questions and prep them and get us ready for the panel to answer. So if you have a question for the panel that you'd like the panel to discuss, please put it into the Q&A section. The chat, however, is an awful lot of fun. And, you know, whether you just want to not have a question but make a statement or interact in any way, the panel members are free to chat on the chat as well. But I always like to start it off with saying, hey, having done hundreds of these webinars, it's always nice to know that there really is a live audience out there. So if you want to take a moment, say hello in chat, let us know where you're logging on from. It's amazing to me. I've been in the internet now a really long time, 25 years, and it's always amazing to me that, you know, this is a worldwide thing. It's not just people in my backyard. So if you'd like to chat or you want to tell us where you're from, please feel free to log on, say hi, and we'll get started in a moment. I'm sorry. Before we go, okay, just making sure the chat did in fact work. Before we go, before we get started, let us introduce our great panel today. In no particular order, I'm going to introduce each of our panelists and ask them to give a little bit of their own background. I'm going to start with Eric Carter. And Eric, if you wouldn't mind starting off.
Sure. Thanks, Alan. I am the Director of Product Marketing here at Sysdig. I'm focused on our partnerships, and AWS is like the king of those. So keeps me busy. For those not familiar with Sysdig, you know, we're all about security visibility to help you confidently run containers. Perfect for this topic today with what we're talking about with Ecs Anywhere. And so, yeah, I've been at Sysdig for about 3.5 years, which, you know, in the startup world is a pretty long time. Anyway, glad to be here. Thanks, Alan.
Thank you. Next up, I want to introduce you to, and I am going to do my best, Raghu.
Yeah. Hi, Alan.
Chandrasekaran.
Yeah, you did better than my in-laws.
Okay. I don't know. You know, that might have been a low bar, Raghu. I don't know, but why don't you go from there if you don't mind introducing yourself?
Yeah. Thanks, Alan. I'm Raghu. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Cognizant AWS Business Group. At Cognizant, we help enterprises transform themselves with the possibilities offered by AWS and with Cognizant offerings. Glad to be here. Thanks, Alan.
Thank you, and welcome. Next up, we have Taylor Bird. And Taylor, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Yes, thanks, Alan. Thanks, all. I'm Taylor Bird. I'm the VP of Technology Strategy at Rackspace. Most people know Rackspace, been around a long time, started as a hosting company. Here at Rackspace, I oversee a lot of our technology strategy, sort of the cohesion across all of our business units, and really looking at things like cloud-native technologies, serverless containers. I came to Rackspace via a company called Annika, a leading premier partner in the AWS ecosystem. I was sort of part of the initial startup community at Annika, and I've been doing cloud stuff for about 10 years now, so it's been quite a while. So glad to be here.
Thank you, Taylor. Next up, well, last up actually, but not least, is Deepak Kalakuri. Deepak, if you wouldn't mind.
Thanks, Alan. Nice to meet you all. Deepak Kalakuri, I lead product for ECS, the Elastic Container Service at AWS. Excited to be here. I live in the Bay Area, and it's nice sunny out today.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, guys, if I didn't say it from the beginning, I apologize. But today's roundtable is around ECS and ECS Anywhere, managing hybrid container workloads with ECS and ECS Anywhere. You know, Amazon Elastic Container Service, for those of you who may not know what ECS stands for, ECS has been around for years now, a couple of years, and it's really become sort of a de facto standard. And, you know, it gave people the ability to run these, you know, this environment in your Amazon environment. Back in reInvent 2020, we announced Amazon ECS Anywhere, which gave us the ability to now take your ECS on the road, right, to run it outside of Amazon. And that's been a breath of fresh air for many people who, you know, wanted to, let's say, escape the four walls of AWS. Each of you are partners here and working with the ECS and ECS Anywhere. We're going to jump into a little bit, and I'm going to ask each of you a question. But before I get to a specific question, I wanted to just, you know, Taylor, if you don't mind me picking on you, I mean, Rackspace is kind of a perfect partner, I would think, for ECS Anywhere, right? Because you can have your customers then doing the ultimate hybrid of hosting at AWS as well as maybe in Rackspace. So if you wouldn't mind sort of setting the table, what does really ECS and ECS Anywhere mean to those at Rackspace and Rackspace customers?
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Alan. Yeah, I mean, I think it's you sort of nailed the importance of ECS and how important that's been. And I think the addition of the Anywhere variant, you know, we do deal with a lot of customers doing hybrid deployments, be it as a means to migrate all the way, as a means to leave some stuff they don't want to deal with during the migration. And for a lot of businesses these days, hybrid's sort of where they're going to land for some time, having things in the public cloud and elsewhere. But we do see a lot of customers that are like, you know, listen, maybe we do need to leave something out of the public cloud. Maybe we want to, maybe we don't, whatever the reason is, we have that. But otherwise, we're an AWS shop. Everything is AWS. Either we were born in the cloud or, you know, we've really migrated and evolved to that. So the ability to be able to do something like ECS, but put that in your data center and your private cloud, that's really huge because, you know, many reasons a company would go all in on one platform is sort of that everyone knows the same thing. You can build automation and tooling and everything around that. Your security controls, your deployment, your testing can all be built on that one platform. But up until things like this, if I want to do that hybrid, I had to reinvent all of that stuff somewhere else. And I had 2 copies, 3 copies, 4 copies. So all that automation that's supposed to speed me up is really slowing me down because now teams are segmented. So I think that's where ECS Anywhere is you know, really huge to the hybrid community because now the platform that one's used to, they can use in their data center. They don't have to have a whole separate stack. That just makes it easier for teams to ramp up new people, to do things more quickly. And so I do think that's a bit of a game changer in sort of the hybrid landscape because hybrid now doesn't mean you have to choose an entirely different technology stack. It's just a different location. And I think that's going to really change what that means for a lot of companies in a very positive way.
Absolutely. Raghu, if you don't mind,
Yeah, sure.
I'd like you to jump on that. You guys are, I'm sorry. I mean, for those who aren't familiar, Cognizant deals with some of the largest enterprises organizations in the world, complex environments, right? What does it mean for you?
Right. So at Cognizant, like you said, right, we try to achieve enterprise transformation at scale. So we work with companies with thousands of applications. And if you look at any typical enterprise application portfolio, not all application candidates can be treated alike. You have these commodity applications. These applications have been with the enterprise for a long time with minimum degree of change, but it still has a user community. Then you have your COTS applications or enterprise products that an enterprise would buy and then help them with the business process. Then you have truly differentiating applications which create business value for customers. Now, what we have seen in the enterprise is not all applications have the business case for true modernization. So we have been helping with customers to move these differentiating applications onto AWS, modernize on ECS, and then we have these commodity applications. Still, actually, sometimes they stay on-prem because there is no business case to move them. And then you have these two different worlds. Then you have this modern application, modern architectures on AWS, on ECS. And then you have a commodity applications, sometimes retained on-prem on a completely different legacy way of working. Just like Taylor said, now with ECS Anywhere, we have a uniform way. So there doesn't have to be two different worlds. You have a consistent and uniform way of modernizing your entire application portfolio across both on-prem and AWS with consistent tooling, more importantly, consistent management and consistent observability and operations. So I think that's what ECS Anywhere brings to the table. So
fair. Now, securing the cloud just when you're just on EWS by in and of itself is a chore. When we start doing hybrid and multiple locations and stuff, of course, it's exponentially harder. But nevertheless, I'm going to guess Sysdig's a fan. Eric, what's your take on it?
Yeah, we are. So first of all, the customers of ours who use ECS, and Deepak can confirm this, right? Which is they love it because it's easy. They don't have to learn a whole lot of new primitives and things, right? But those who had sort of the security requirements, the compliance mandate, who weren't comfortable, right? They were kind of locked out of using it as a managed service. So on the point one, right? Now they can, right? And what's really cool and unique about this is I can run this stuff on-prem, and yet the managed part, and again, like I think I've got this right, the managed orchestration is still in the cloud, right? And there's facilities for, hey, if the internet disconnects, no problem. We've got that covered for you too, right? But yeah, so now sometimes the reason we kept it on site was security compliance. Maybe it was that data we're afraid to put somewhere else, or there's some organization that says we can't have it somewhere else. So we're a fan, one, because that's what we focus on, right? Not just about where you're running it, but how do you secure that? How do you get better visibility so you know who's doing what with your data? That's actually helped a lot of people get into the cloud because they feel more comfortable. But now you have this hybrid approach, and we've always been like, go ahead, install it anywhere. You get that ability to see it, secure it, put controls in place, no matter where that is. And so this kind of concept of anywhere that AWS is after makes sense to us, and we've been following along and making sure that we're right there with them.
Yeah. So Alan, if I can add to Eric, so Eric mentioned security and compliance. So patch management is a big headache for enterprises. Patching all the servers on-prem and AWS. ECS does a very good job of, taking the heavy lifting of patch management. You don't have to worry about patching your servers. And with ECS Anywhere, I think that's a big headache taken off of IT support and operations. With ECS Anywhere, the patch management is taken care of on-prem and also on the cloud, on AWS.
Absolutely. Deepak, did you want to say something?
Yeah. So actually, Raghu made a couple of good points in addition to what Taylor added. So ECS Anywhere came out of our 95% of the products AWS builds are what customers ask us to build. The other 5% is innovations that we look around and figure out, hey, this is heavy lifting that we can remove for customers. So ECS Anywhere sort of straddles both buckets. It primarily came from customers who have to stay on-prem for data residency or compliance reasons or latency reasons. But they still didn't have a lot of choice for running containers, right? They'd have to go with some open source technology or a vendor supported one, but nevertheless, the ops workload on maintaining that and patching that every 3 months to a drumbeat is not easy. Whereas with ECS, we have customers running large workloads with 3-member team. That's it. That's all they have. And they love the simplicity of that. And they love the way they interact with AWS in that fashion. So these customers wanted a similar one on-prem. And that's really where the genesis of ECS Anywhere started last year under announcement for a preview last year. What we hope to launch this year pretty soon is the ability, the actual GA of this product, where you would get an SLA-backed control plane sitting in the cloud, where customers have to do nothing pretty much from a control plane standpoint. The data still resides in their own data centers or a Raspberry Pi if that's where they're running it. It's really infrastructure agnostic. So that's one big advantage. We have a couple of startups doing a private beta with us from the EMEA region, for example, building personal wallets for their startups as part of their business. And the data has to stay on-prem. So they use ECS for the rest of the application workloads that they have. But for this particular one, they're very excited with ECS Anywhere. An interesting market that I actually find with ECS Anywhere, which we didn't think about, the other 5% of the use cases where we said customers dragged us into new use cases and new market segments, is the edge market. Something we didn't think at the outset for where ECS Anywhere could be. And there are customers that are running private betas with us today, where they have hundreds of factory floors, and they have a need to process data at the edge because it's just too expensive or doesn't make sense to send it back to the cloud before you process it. It could be image processing data from multiple CCTVs, or it could be machine data that they need to process for insights. Many such use cases. For all those customers, running an orchestration plane within each factory floor and managing it is a large headache. With ECS Anywhere, they're very excited because now they have just one control plane, and you can take all those factory floors and probably just map them as ECS clusters, and you get a centralized governance and security-driven way to just manage it. I'll take a pause. We'll continue more.
Okay, I love look, the edge seems to be the new battlefront, right? And we're all, I think, in the year ahead and the years ahead, we'll be seeing more and more of what maybe was originally designed for a public cloud or even an on-prem. How the edge is going to affect that, certainly. Taylor, I wanted to come back to you, if you don't mind, and talk to you a little bit implementing ECS with Fargate.
No topic. I'll just jump right in. Yeah. No, I mean, I think if we look at, without going into the technical specifics, but, we look at our customers that are using ECS, and I think Deepak would agree, tell me if I'm wrong, but a lot of what at least causes a customer to look at ECS is that simplicity, that ease of use, right? There are other ways to run containers, but a lot of them can be really complex. That complexity may be very needed in a lot of places, but in other places it's not. And I think at times, as a market, we've almost conflated that, right? We have really hard ways to do it. So we have customers looking to do things with ECS, do the simplicity, because sometimes just being great at running containers is not of huge business value at the end of the day. That's just heavy lifting that has to be done. So ECS is really great at that. ECS Anywhere obviously brings that problem to more solutions in the data center and on the edge. But then if you continue that thread of simplicity, I also think that's where Fargate has really stepped in. We have I'll say it's a subset, a large set of customers that they're doing more of the innovation plays with containers. It's not a migration vehicle. It's not a management hurdle. It's part of their cloud native sort of, bleeding edge stuff. And so they'll do some of that stuff in serverless and that sort of technology, but a lot of that work also ends up in containers. But in those worlds, what we see is containerization is a part of the solution. It may not be the entire solution. And so the ease of that part being orchestrated without you having to do a whole lot is huge. One of the examples I have is we have one customer does a huge amount of transactional batch processing for a transportation, sort of a distribution workflow. Think logistics and moving things around the country. So a lot of their processes now are serverless and Kafka based, and so they're all streaming. But they have some big batch things that need to run, do these huge computational loads in like 5 minutes and then shut down. And originally, they didn't want to do anything of that with containers. They just, they couldn't do it serverless. They're like, there's no reason to go with containers. We'll just run it on these giant EC2 instances that just live forever. And so one thing we did with them was to say, well, hold on, let's look at this. And through ECS and Fargate, we were able to actually map that environment to a container workload. So this massive, I think it was an X16 large or, massive instance wasn't sitting there. It would just wake up when it needed to and went away. Supporting a serverless workload with a very non-serverless sort of problem. And so without Fargate, that would have been possible. The orchestration of doing that, keeping that running, that would have been an entirely other cluster for that customer to manage. So we're seeing customers use Fargate in really interesting solutions like that. We see it also in a lot of sort of dev test scenarios, which I think sort of get the common billing. But we're seeing large enterprises really sort of bridge that legacy to container to serverless workload with things like Fargate, because again, they don't have to reinvent the wheel. They don't have to do all this heavy lifting. They containerize the app. They need it to run. They trust AWS to run it, and they can just hand it off. So we're seeing Fargate used with these sort of really innovative solutions that a number of years ago when Fargate came out, if you'd asked me if that's what they'd be used for, in my case, I would have said, no, that doesn't make any sense. And now we're seeing more and more of that. So I think that's a really interesting sort of use case and collection of users that we're seeing for the Fargate solution on ECS.
Yeah.
Hey, Taylor, you made a comment there about, one of the use cases was that the batch job didn't live for very long. And we looked at what our customers were doing, and we found that a huge number of containers were running 5 minutes or less, right? Which could, not necessarily, but could be very well served by something like Fargate. So it's really, it's great that Ecs Anywhere already is, that Fargate is thought, to be included, because that could be very, very helpful. And yeah, it's amazing to think that whatever I'm doing is just spinning up, running for a few minutes and out, right? Which, I think is kind of a lot of what we're seeing. And obviously, when something is that short-lived, you make sure you know what's going on inside and so on. And again, it's a very cool use case that you brought up, right?
Right.
Absolutely is.
Just to tack on to that, Fargate actually provides two big benefits in my mind. One, Eric, from a security standpoint, because everything is secure. It's just one task on one instance. It comes up, does its thing, goes away. So a lot of financial services customers use Fargate from what we've seen as well for that reason. The second one is the benefit of the heavy lifting that Taylor was referring to, where the whole army management and everything else around that instance is just taken care of, and you get a true serverless experience.
Yeah, one thing that we've been focused on is that the fundamentals of kind of secure DevOps doesn't change. You still want to scan your container image, because it might run for just a little while, but that's still, if you're just putting out there with vulnerabilities, not something you want to do. So that's, we've tried to make that automated, and then obviously being able to see, it ran for 2 minutes, but what happened in that 2 minutes? And those kind of things, especially for, back to the compliance point, someone that needs to have that sort of record. Yeah, you need to have the record, right? If that's a part of the control that you said you would do for SOC 2 or for PCI or for NIST, but yeah. So we always remind people that Fargate is awesome and makes things so much simpler, but still follow best practices.
Right.
Absolutely. I was surprised. I've seen so many surveys. The average lifespan of a container, right? The seconds, minutes, if not seconds. Hey, you know what, though, to understand more where the audience is, we've prepared a few polling questions, too, and they're going to take a second for folks to answer, but we really appreciate your answering these. So the first one I'm going to ask is this: where are you in your hybrid container lifecycle? Let me put it up there. Where are you in your hybrid container lifecycle, considering adopting or already running production workloads? And so if you would, hopefully I launched that. Yeah, people are voting.
It's out there.
Got a few people voting. We can get more people voting than that, guys. Come on.
And I guess that means, right, running both on-prem and in the cloud.
Well, to me, right, when I'm defining hybrid container, I mean on-prem, or not only on-prem, but a public cloud and a private cloud. That could be in a data center. It could be on-prem.
Self-hosted. Yeah.
Yep. So thinking of it that way, we've got a few people who logged on here. We've got some shy folks out in the audience, I guess. But you know what? I'm surprised 50% of the audience still considering, 3% are adopting, and 18% adopting, and 35% already running in workloads. You know, that 35%, well, it's going down now a little. But I mean, Deepak, you're at AWS, so I'm going to make you the expert, or maybe Raghu is, handling a lot of customers at Cognizant. It seems about right to me. 30% of cloud users are running production workloads in hybrid environments.
So Deepak, if I can.
No, sure.
I think, I would think, the numbers make sense to me. So, because the hybrid container adoption you're just seeing the ramp up in the market. So 30% is, I think it's a good ballpark number. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's actually gone down to 26%, but close enough. I've got one other question here, I think, for you. And that is, what's the most important aspect of running containers in a hybrid manner to you? Is it ease of management? Is it the security, which is always in the top 3, but we've only got 3 here anyway, or proximity to data? And for some folks, proximity to data. And I would also, well, I didn't write these questions, but knowing where my data resides is important to some folks, though that sometimes tied into security. But again, here, it looks like security is the runaway winner, with the other two about equal. Yeah.
For the proximity to data, we haven't, I don't think, uttered the phrase yet, but that phrase data gravity, it always connotes this really interesting picture of the weight of the data that we have here, right? And that's one of those use cases, right? We're not going to move all of that. Like the physics of moving it doesn't make sense. But good news, we can tap into that now, right? If it's sitting on our whatever, EMC, NetApp, you name it, right?
Mm-hmm. All right. So I'm going to close that polling question. We're back and get back here to again, reminding Q&A if you want to ask the panel questions. So security it's always the top of mind, and 2021 is off to a booming start around security, and so it will continue to be top of mind. But security's partner at the hip is compliance, and Raghu, I'm sure this is a big thing for our Cognizant customer base as well. It is for everyone, but so how does the whole, again, the more complex the environment, sometimes the harder it is to prove compliance, let alone be compliant. How does that play into this with you folks at Cognizant?
Right. So when enterprises adopt cloud, right, AWS, what happens is eventually there will be 2 different types of cloud operating models that exist in an enterprise. You have the operating model that is more, I would say, heavily automated. You talked about compliance, so I talk about continuous compliance, automation, CI/CD pipelines, infrastructure as a code for workloads running on AWS. When it comes to on-prem, there is still the legacy cloud operating model. So you have this thin cloud platform engineering team for workloads running on AWS. Then you have, your old way of provisioning and managing compliance and operating in the hybrid world. So I think services like ECS Anywhere will help us bridge that gap between the cloud operating model on the cloud and the cloud operating model on-prem, so that you have a centralized cloud operations team, and compliance can be achieved. I should say elegantly on AWS with automation, continuous compliance. I think with ECS Anywhere, we can bring that paradigm onto on-premise and help enterprises. And we have seen, a lot of large enterprises, early adopters of public cloud, managing both, security and compliance, how we manage service, and then financial management, both for the on-prem and on the AWS world, has become, I think, quite a challenging scenario. I think services like Ecs Anywhere will bridge that gap. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Deepak, this is really a question for you, but then I'd like to hear everyone's kind of take on it, right? The interesting thing that I see about ECS Anywhere is I'm almost positive that when Amazon, originally sort of envisioned this, Edge wasn't the play that it is now, but it was really a play of, look, these are people who are already in public cloud and now want to, as we say, go beyond the four walls of AWS. So the migratory path was people who have already made the public cloud migration and are now expanding their hybrid footprint, right, with ECS at its heart, or at its core. No pun intended. And, doing that, right? An interesting thing, I think, Raghu, you hit on it, is that's not necessarily the migration path that we're seeing people take. Deepak, you already mentioned the edge, right? We have seen multi-cloud. We've seen all kinds of different things, especially this last year with COVID, and it's kind of acted as an accelerant in experimentation. But it's a perfect example of, you put something out there and you let smart people play with it, and they get their own ideas. So Deepak, when you look at the future for ECS Anywhere, it's probably not what you guys envisioned, 2 or 3 years ago, or 2 years ago. Where do you see that going?
Sure. No, it's a great question. We think about it every 2-3 months, as you would expect. So for ECS Anywhere, as I mentioned, the future lies in first expanding on what we're going to deliver in the first MVP launch into more web applications that customers can then stitch across a hybrid cloud and have load balances and all of those functionality, service discovery, routing. So there's a set of use cases and features that customers who want to run legacy enterprise workloads or web applications from their data centers need through ECS. So there's that market segment. Then, as I mentioned, the edge set of use cases are pretty new, and they're pulling us into feature requests such as, hey, I need to run for a longer period of time in a disconnected mode. So ECS, when at launch, would support like 6 hours of disconnection, at which point you have the IAM roles, timeout, etc. So the tasks would continue to run, but additional task launches you wouldn't be able to do. But what if you could sustain a 72-hour disconnection? If you're a restaurant, for example, in the Midwest somewhere, and you lost your network for 3 days, how would that work? So those are the set of use cases we're thinking about next for ECS Anywhere. From an ECS standpoint, while we don't publicly discuss roadmap, there's a GitHub roadmap process out there, so you can go check out. There's few different things that seem to resonate more with the folks there, especially I would think developers who contribute more on the GitHub. There's things around better troubleshooting and console experience. That's one set of areas that we've seen, and we'll continue to invest in that. There's things around security, a secure software supply chain, if you will, all the way from a CI/CD pipeline, baking everything into it in terms of knowledge and visibility as to what's running and is that compliant. And that really speaks to two different personas. As we go, especially more hybrid, we would have to cater to two distinct personas, or maybe three, depending on how we count it. We got the platform admin persona, that central IT in some cases, and they have a certain way of orientation and processes today. And we got the developers, on the other hand, who are trying to innovate and want to be unshackled from all the, for example, requesting a cluster to be set up process. What ECS Anywhere really brings to them is the platform admins can give the same old virtual machine that the developers needed and load it up with agents, and all of a sudden it's container-ready infrastructure. And the rest of their tooling will still continue to work. So the friction between the two teams is greatly reduced, and developers can just go innovate with their own existing tool sets, and while admins can worry about the security and everything else that they cared about, costs, for example, or existing processes. So that's how we sort of look at our roadmap.
Excellent. So, guys, the rest of my panel, jump in here. You've heard Deepak talk about roadmap, things they don't talk about. What does that mean? What does that mean for your businesses? What does it mean for your customers?
Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, Alan, if I can add to what Deepak said.
Sure.
So Deepak talked about something called, reducing the friction. That's exactly an area that Cognizant we are focusing on. Reduce the friction of adoption of containers within an enterprise. So what's happening in large enterprises today is there is a dual mandate of governance from the centralized cloud platform engineering teams and the agility and self-service demanded by the application development teams. So the application development teams would like the autonomy of migrating or deploying their applications and container images on ECS. But at the same time, the centralized cloud platform engineering team would like to ensure that it is done in a secure and compliant way. So we are investing in platforms and tools called SSPs. In short, I mean, what we call as shared service platforms. What these platforms do is it provides the flexibility of application development teams who have their own CI/CD pipelines and way of deploying applications, integrate into this shared service platform, and then the centralized cloud platform engineering team can enforce their standards so that, I mean, so you can achieve the twin balance of both governance and agility. I think that's an area I think Deepak also alluded to, and there is another AWS service called AWS Proton, which kind of does that. But this is an area that of focus and investment for us. I mean, achieving the twin mandate of governance and agility. So
we've seen that exact thing, Raghu, right? And that's kind of why we started talking about the need for security governance, all that from the time you're building to the time you're running. Because what would happen is excited engineers, those developers, those folks, right? They would get something done, and then they try to run it on the platform, and then only to be stopped from rolling it out widely because some of the security checks weren't hit appropriately, right? And that's the worst thing, right? You don't really want to do that. So, and we use this phrase probably too much, and Alan, you'll laugh at this, like shift left, right? One of the concepts there is do your security homework early, even in the CI/CD pipeline. And by the way, to the extent that you can all be singing from the same hymnal, and now everyone, platform owners and developers and security professionals, you start to reduce that friction. But get it done early. That way you're not stopped when you're so excited about your new app rolling out onto ECS, right?
Right.
And so everyone's getting better at this. I think the newness of containers, even though they've been around for a long time, but trying to figure out, do I have the right tool set? All of that's getting better. I mean, and thus, like the terms like DevSecOps, even guys who once didn't even want to talk about security now have to.
Right.
So that's certainly where we focus on giving them a way to more harmoniously work together and get what they need done, right? And see what they need, control what they need.
Yep.
Yeah, and I want to pitch in there. I mean, I think if you zoom out a little bit from the specifics that you're all talking about, I mean, what we're seeing, I'm curious if everyone else has seen this as well, is that even that fundamental concept of central IT, that's falling apart. That division between the build teams and the run team, it's blurry, if not gone, even in our largest enterprise clients. And what I think that leads to is you've got these smaller teams, they're enabled, whether they're enabled officially or through shadow IT, they're able to do things. And that creates this, a security and compliance challenge. But I think that's where the world's going to continue to head, right? The idea that we're going to slow down, that's not it. As more of these technologies keep adding, we're seeing these smaller teams, they want to use it. And maybe they want to use ECS when the company is a Kubernetes company or they're serverless. I mean, we're going to see the teams using what they want to do. And just really to throw a problem without a solution here is we do see that it creates more burden to not just think about security early, but like it's got to be baked in because you're going to have people that have no idea. You think about data architects, data scientists, product managers using like no-code, low-code solutions, like they're going to be out here using these services, and they've never thought about security. And that's okay. That's how business is going to speed up. But I think it creates this massive challenge that these tools have to be. It's so important that we have these common platforms that you can use the same thing, so that your security controls don't just go awry as the business adapts. So that's a big sort of change we see in the industry. It's creating a lot of challenges, but also a lot of opportunity. Is that these technologies are easier to approach, often to compliance is peril. And so we're seeing a lot of that, at least out there with our customers.
Absolutely. You know what? Look, what did we say? 26% of people already have it in production. Closer to 50% are still kind of thinking about it, let's call it. Let's get specific about what some of the specific challenges and concerns customers have with just running containers in general, right? Because here's the interesting thing. For all of that, what that survey showed, Deepak, I've seen surveys that 75 or 70+% of all new applications being deployed on AWS are in fact Kubernetes container-based, right? So what are some of these challenges and concerns? Deepak, I'll let you kick it off. Taylor, we'll go to you, but I'd like us all to kind of jump in on that.
Are you referring to, Alan, challenges running containers on premises or just running containers?
No, in general, not just on-prem. Even within ECS on AWS.
Yep. You mentioned Kubernetes, but I'm assuming you referred to containers in general. So
yes, in general.
So there are, the first big challenge that I've seen is talent, right? You need to know somebody who knows containers. And when you look at options out there, either you have to go to industry conferences and get those certifications and all of that, or you already know AWS and the APIs and how they work and the services, so you can just natively take all of that knowledge, and deploying containers on AWS with ECS then just becomes the next step up. So finding talent is the first challenge that I've seen. The second one is around management of the control plane itself. Because depending on what technology you choose to run, you'd have to, Raghu talked about patch management and everything else before. So there's a lot of operational overhead based on your choices that you make. The third one is for running containers in cloud. What I've seen some customers deal with is, hey, we already have a lot of investments we've made in our on-premises data centers. So yes, I do want to run containers, but probably not yet in the cloud. So now if I want to run it on-prem, how do I do that? What are my choices? And why is my toolset very different from running it in the cloud? So that's one. And finally, when it comes to partners and ISVs who build, or those who serve their own end customers, rather, their end customers could be in different places. They could sometimes be running their own app in a particular cloud, or they could be running their app on premises, or there are verticals that you need to be on-prem to effectively compete for business. And those ISV partners tell us that if we could give one consistent tool set, that'll really make them more competitive in the marketplace out there, because also more efficient and more secure, everything included. So those are the top challenges that I've seen. I would love to hear from the rest of the panel as to what they're seeing in their customers.
Yeah, I just want to kind of add and not just do the thing where I agree, but I agree with all the challenges you gave. I think the themes that we get that I sort of is a great segue, Deepak, was it's the talent and the management. Usually those, at least for our customers, that's actually where the talent gap can kind of be. If I need a developer who can develop on a container, regardless of platform, not that that's easy, but they're out there. But it's the person who can manage, who can develop, who can automate that, especially in multiple locations, multiple public, private, et cetera. That becomes a problem. And what we're seeing is it's not just that, oh, that's difficult. It's sort of like I mentioned earlier in the call. The ROI on that can be difficult. Unless you're very specific or at a massive scale, having the world's best container management automation platform team may not be of huge business value to your customers or to you, right? Because you're just making it work, and that's hard. And it's not to diminish people that do that work, but for a lot of smaller shops, companies that are looking to be more lean, they could spend a year investing in a container management platform. They started the year with an application idea, and they end the year still with the same application idea, they can't implement it. All they've done is got the piping constructed. And so we see a lot of customers really struggling with that. Like, yeah, we want to go containers. We want to move fast. We're probably doing that to build some application or bring something to market. And it's just hard to say, are we going to stop to build all this? Or are we going to look at something like, ECS Anywhere? Well, now I can at least train on one thing, not 5 things, and that starts to solve it. So I think that's a perspective we see a lot with our customers around that talent shortage is, does it make sense for me to invest in being the best at just container management? And in many cases, it's not, and that does create this challenge of what do I do next if that's where I want to go?
Right. So if I can add to what Taylor just said, so many customers fall into the trap of working with the least common denominator of container services. They try to abstract as much as possible, but by doing so, they get into unnecessary operational complexity. I think going native as ECS and ECS Anywhere, you truly, achieving what you intended to set out in the first place, right? Talking about the heavy lifting again, right? You focus on the business, building your application, listening to your customers, rather than spending your cycles on managing your containers, observing your containers, right? So we recommend going truly cloud native. Adopt ECS Anywhere or ECS and not abstract and do the container management on your own.
So Raghu, do you have some specific examples of customers that you can talk about there?
Yeah. So we have heard some customers talk about. They do have their, reasons for doing so. Where they talk about interoperability, right? For example, if I develop an application and then a microservices architecture, do containers, but I want to do it in a very cloud agnostic way. You may set out to do that for the right reasons, but as you get into the life cycle of your application, you won't be able to respond to, your market, your changes, because you'll be so engrossed in managing your application, managing your ecosystem. And then they do realize that, that's not the right thing to do. So container interoperability, cloud interoperability, ability to move container workloads between on-prem and public cloud, it's not the right reason on how you should design your system. Rather, you should look at, I should focus on the business, building the software and the application, not on the infrastructure and the management.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Eric, I know you might be right back here in a second. So if we lose Eric, he'll be back here.
Yeah.
These are real issues, though. And I wanted to come back to Taylor a little bit and ask you, similar to what I asked Raghu, give us some container security, customer, like real life examples of what you guys are going through here as we see this. I almost call it a reverse hybrid, because to me, hybrid was always you started not in the public cloud and migrated to public cloud. So let's call it right now reverse hybrid.
Yeah. I think I've got one. I'll wait for Eric to come back for one of his take. But a non-security example I give, and again, I'm reiterating my greatest hits here, but it is about that management plane. I think Raghu really nailed it with the idea that, you can very easily end up in this trap where you've abstracted the abstractions away from the abstractions, and then someone's just maintaining that. We've seen that a lot in container adoption. Like I said, you'll come in, there's this really grand system, and it's beautiful, and it's well-engineered, and it's awesome. But all it does is deploy containers and run them in multiple locations. And it's really easy to fall into that trap for the right reasons. So I see that. The other example of a challenge I actually wanted to mention, because I wanted to kind of I wanted to see everyone, but Eric specifically, if your power's back, I thought one thing we see with security specifically around containers, that I don't have a great answer for, is customers will ask about container security. And first, the answer to that can be so broad or so specific, it doesn't, there's not one answer. And I think in the container ecosystem, especially with Docker and Kubernetes, there's a lot of customers that like to just sit back and wait for the community to say, this is how you do that. In container security, we're seeing customers like that hasn't necessarily happened. And we're seeing customers struggle with, listen, I can implement all the way down to this like runtime heuristic-based thumbprint security model. But do I need to do that in my dev environment, my test environment? Is it enough to just say that the EC2 instance that's running or the server that's running in the ECS Anywhere node is secure. So security is one where our customers are really like sort of struggling with, not that there's nowhere to go. There's so many right ways to go, and we're seeing that a lot. So I wanted to put Eric a little bit on the spot and see how you all are helping customers navigate that.
Yeah, you make a good point, right? Which is it's multifaceted. There's not a one thing. It reminds me more when we get asked about compliance. Can I put you in and be compliant? It's like, well, we're going to be able to provide for you a way to get, understand where your risks are in your CI/CD pipeline or your registry. And now, because it's different than a VM standard kind of, the old days environment, you're going to need to try and understand what is happening at runtime. Does the container block visibility? Can I see that, right? And how do you get that? How do you get that visibility? Now, I also want to be able to respond. If a container dies and takes with it what evidence you might have needed, can you do something like forensics? So there's that side of it as well, right? And so, yeah, what do we need? Well, you probably need a little, need security on your perimeter. You need cloud security, right? There's ways to tap into things like CloudTrail at AWS to see, is somebody logging in without multi-factor authentication, all the way down to the workload. And we hear the kind of facets of like cloud security posture management, cloud workload protection, right? In essence, you need a little bit of all of that. Now, depending on your sensitivity, and what kind of standards you need to meet, can you be, is it big or small? Is it all or not? Can I do open source, right? We started the Falco project, which is now part of CNCF. That's a runtime project, and so there's not an answer, but there's sort of approaches that whether it's, Sysdig or some other tool, you should consider the approach. Right, and every day AWS has more and more they can offer in that regard too. So, yeah, I'm not going to give you the one answer.
yeah. Well, and I was hoping you wouldn't, because I think that's really where we're seeing customers. I don't know. For me, I see customers that I don't want to call them laggards. I don't think it's that mindset. It's the sit and wait mindset, because we're in industries that can't go first. We can't take the risk and fail fast. We're a bank. We can't really fail fast. That's not great for us. And so we're definitely seeing customers not struggling, but like sort of waiting for that answer. And it's like helping navigate that answer is very specific to you. And so I do think that that's one of the more advisory analysis pieces that I'm seeing customers get stuck on.
I agree. Guys, I need to take a quick minute for housekeeping. I didn't mention at the beginning of the show, we do give out 4 Amazon gift cards at each of these roundtables, and they're randomly picked by our staff in the back. And I've been told that the winners for today's Amazon gift cards are Alex M., Bill T., Gary C., and Arthur M. So to each of you, congratulations. Someone from our team will reach out and they email you these Amazon gift cards. Not from AWS, mind you, but from Amazon gift cards. So you can't, maybe you could use them. I don't know, Deepak. Can you use an Amazon gift card on AWS? I don't think so. Anyway, but enjoy, buy something good. We've got just a few minutes left here. Deepak, I wanted to come to you. I'm not into doing an ECS versus EKS, comparison. But for customers, and they may be Rackspace and Sysdig and Cognizant customers who are out here looking and saying, I want to run containers. I want to run them on AWS, ECS, EKS, Kubernetes. How do I make my choice, right? Like what, do I have am I drowning in a sea of containers here? Too many choices. What would you advise people?
Sure. There's a great blog that our VP put out some time back. I'll point to that. But the essence of it is this. I don't think it's a one-way door kind of decision, what we typically call at Amazon one-way doors where you can't come back in. I don't think containers and picking an orchestrator for your workloads is that kind of a binary decision either. What we believe at AWS is giving customers choice. And choosing a container service, like I said, shouldn't have to be a one-way door decision. Both services whether you're running a Kubernetes-based EKS or ECS, benefit from some of the same underlying AWS service integrations. That said, the difference really comes in the portability of the containers doesn't go away, right? Because as Raghu mentioned, you would slowly start building integrations into the cloud for your app. So that's where the container portability doesn't go away, but the rest of the stuff you do around that is irrespective of which orchestration you choose. What customers tell us that they love about ECS is the simplicity it provides, right? It gives you an opinionated way for running containers at scale, and it reduces the time that you need to build, deploy, and get your containers and migrate to a containerized workload, especially with ECS on Fargate. It's serverless compute, takes away a lot of decisions you'd have to make on your own in terms of figuring out how do I set up my compute, network, security configurations, load balancers, which are built in. So that's really where ECS shines. It's not about a specific workload type. It's rather an opinionation on how do you get to your containers running in production very quickly. And we have large customers and financial services and other entertainment companies, Sony, for example, all of those reference customers you find on our website, they run production-grade workloads on ECS. Where we've seen customers choose Kubernetes or our Kubernetes-based offering, which is EKS, is where they've decided that they want to run Kubernetes because for whatever reasons they have. They may have a talent pool that prefers Kubernetes, etc. And they want the flexibility of tweaking all the knobs that Kubernetes gives, and they can maintain a platform team to take care of that, and they're okay upgrading and patching every 3 months and taking care of all of that open source orchestration. They get the flexibility. So they can choose the powerful flexibility angle if that's what they're going for. So in essence, the way I put it is, it's not a decision you'd have to make at a company level. I think it's a decision you can make at a team level and based on your application or workload. And there's a bunch of applications where you don't have to actually actually need the complexity or the utmost flexibility that Kubernetes gives you. Not every application needs that. So you don't have to burden yourself with all of that.
Yeah, most of your enterprise commodity applications that don't go through a high degree of change, but still has a user community, are great candidates for ECS. It doesn't require the complexity of EKS.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I mean, I think part of the beauty of cloud, since I've been doing it, which feels like a long time now in a good way, is that you have all these choices. And we always talk about, or we talk about internally here, it's a challenge for vendors like us, but it's an opportunity for customers. The toolbox keeps growing, sort of the Mary Poppins bag, if that reference works. And that's a great thing. And so with container customers, we often have to say, hold up. Containers are not popular because they're fun to manage. I'm a big Kubernetes fan, but containerization and how you manage them are two very different things. I think it's very important if you're taking an app mindset. And I think Deepak said it well, and Raghu, you mentioned right tool for the job, right process for what you're trying to solve. And I think that's, the powerful thing. If you can write your app in a container environment, if your CI/CD platform can natively understand the targets without that least common denominator approach, that's the flexibility we see so many customers, because then it's like, maybe I use a robust management system for this environment. This app is my more streamlined, quicker. This is the supporting application. And then I think that extends beyond ECS, EKS. That's containers, that's serverless. But that's the benefit of cloud and AWS to me, is you have all these choices. There's usually 5 right answers to the problem you're trying to solve. And ensuring that whatever you build enables that flexibility. I think that's one of the most important architectural investments you can make when you start thinking about how you're going to do this across your organization.
Well, great points. Just to add to that very quickly, what customers running containers on premises did not have an option before ECS Anywhere was a reliable offering outside of managing their own Kubernetes clusters or taking up some Docker Swarm sort of model. And those are complex.
Absolutely. Guys, I hate to do this to you, but we're at the top of the hour and I need to pull the plug. Just when we were getting going here, we got a little momentum going. Maybe we could come back and do it again and we'll continue this conversation, because I think it's a topic that needs to go on there. Just also the blog Deepak mentioned, again, one of the folks in our one of the folks on our back end was able to put the link to that blog that he was mentioning about selecting an orchestrator. So if you look in your chat section quickly, you'll have that. But Deepak, Taylor, Raghu, Eric, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much to AWS for sponsoring this. Thank you most of all to you who have sat in here. If you're watching this on demand after the fact, it was still a great session, and I hope you'll enjoy it. It'll be just as fine on demand as live, so enjoy it. Hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, this is Alan Schimmel for MediaOps, DevOps.com. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.